But yeah, we can just debate. And afterwards I can just inquire on like what exactly you're talking about. But yeah, so essentially I just want to be like very clear on like the metaphysical prerequisites. Essentially, is this going to be holding to Platonian metaphysics for the general metaphysical hypothesis, while also holding to Cyrenius for the hierarchy of forms. So we just want to talk about Plotin and or Plotinus, excuse me, and his metaphysics for most of the parts, as in Nous the One, etc. So is this going to be the Neoplatonic eudaimonis argument against pro-choice? Okay, and it does have an idiosyncratic definition, excuse me, of what eudaimonia is. Okay, all that's being said by eudaimonia is that it's going to be the achievement of noetic a priori knowledge, and the relevant account of knowledge is just going to be a justified true belief with a sensitivity clause, as posited by Robert Nozick. Okay, and I can get into the argument. Essentially, the argument goes as this: Premise 1, the fetus is a sensible form, that which is an image of a dianoetic form. Premise 2, within the dianoetic form, there's a property such as eudaimonia. Premise 3, if within the sensible form fails or is hindered to achieve that which is stipulated within the dianoetic form, then it's a frustration of that form. Conclusion, the fetus is a sensible form. Abortion hinders that which is included within the dianoetic form, which would be a frustration of that form. And within Neoplatonic virtue ethics, it'd be categorized as wrong. Now we can get into the semantics of what like all that is.
Yeah, if you could clarify the semantics on the dianoetic form, that'd be great, man.
Yeah. So by dianoetic forms, essentially we can just like stipulate it as the general definition of forms. But essentially they're just going to be like that which sensible forms are images of. And a general definition of form would just be like an ontological blueprint, that which first order entities stem from. And I can be clear on the first order ontology, on the distinction between first order entities and second order entities. And we can even get into like the metaphysical hypothesis that even if you take second order entities to even be possible, the relevant modality being the metaphysical modality.
So you're positing, I think I understand a dianoetic form sufficiently. Uh, you're positing that it's true the fetus. Does it start at any week in gestation specifically?
It's true of the fetus. Okay, so of the fetus, we're just gonna say, for its ontology, it's based off the dianoetic form of a human, right? And I can just be clear that what's included within the dianoetic form is going to be a property such as eudaimonia. And even if you contend that's not going to be a metaphysical human, that's not going to be something that like really matters for my argument, because I can say something like it's not a metaphysical human. Well, it's still the case that still within the form of a fetus is that the form is made so just that the fetus has to achieve being a human, right? Or has to achieve gaining a soul. Okay. And if you stop it from achieving being a human, then it'll still be wrong. Okay. So whether it's a human currently or not doesn't really matter to me or to the argument.
Uh, well, just to be clear, I never put in contention whether it was a human or not.
I was just
I
pre-talking.
asked you a direct, yeah, I just asked you a direct question that didn't get answered, man.
Yeah. So you said, is it true of the fetus, right?
No, it's not the entire question.
That the yeah of in reference to dianoetic forms, of course. Like if you're asking me, is it true of the fetus such that the fetus is a dianoetic form, then no, that would not be true.
No, I wasn't asking if it was true of the fetus implicit, or I was asking if it was true of the fetus at any particular week in gestation.
That they're a
Specifically.
dianoetic form?
Yeah, when it gains the property of being a
Yeah,
dianoetic
that's
form or
metaphysically
attaining a
impossible.
dianoetic. No, stop. Or attaining the property of having a dianoetic form. Because presumably that's going to be a property about the fetus. It's going to be true of the fetus. I'm not using the is of identity. I'm not using that. I'm just using it as a predication.
Yeah, it would be metaphysically impossible for a fetus, at least discussed within the argument, to be a dianoetic form. And I just want to be very clear on the certain first order ontological profiles. When we discuss this, dianoetic forms are going to be considered second order entities. And I did clarify if you even take second order entities to be even possible within your certain metaphysical hypothesis, because then that would just be like a contentious point that we can discuss. But the case is just that the fetus is a sensible form, just meaning that it's going to be an image of a dianoetic form, or that what is that it's going to be based off something, a dianoetic form for its own ontology, and it must achieve all that's what's included within the dianoetic form.
You're fighting a bunch of points that I never made in the conversation, right? Now, presumably, you think that having a dianoetic form is a property about the fetus, right? You agree? You at least agree to that, right?
having a dianotic form, I probably wouldn't say like having a dianotic form as something true of the sensible form. What I would say is just that having a dianotic form in the sense that they're based off of the dianotic form for their own ontology. Sure, I can agree to that.
Okay, it's based off of it. And so it has a property of being based off of that. Now, with those predications specified, which are just about my question in the first place, can you answer my question now?
I believe I did ask the question. If I answer the question, excuse me. If I didn't answer the question, can you re-ask it?
Yeah, for the third time now, is it the case that this property of being based off of a dianoetic form, which you could say is some biological blueprint, I'm fine with that. Metaphysical blueprint, fine with that. I'm just asking, is it true the fetus at any particular week in gestation specifically?
Yeah, I believe I already answered this. And it's the case that no, it's not. I mean, it would just be the case if you're asking like them being based off the form. Yeah, it's true in the sense of like throughout the entire gestation. But even if it's the case that they're not going to be based off the form of a human, right? It'll still be the case that they're based off a form of the type of thing that is how do I say this? A disposition to be a human, right? And if it's the case that this thing to be a disposition to be a human is frustrated, or in the sense that they're not able to be a human, then yeah, that would just be, wrong, or would be like a frustration of the form. But like to answer your question, it would just be the case that yeah, I would just take it generally throughout the entire time that they are based off the dianotic form of a human.
Okay, okay. So it seems like we clarified that the disposition to be a human or disposition to be categorized under the Homo sapiens species is going to be highlighted under the dianoetic form. And so, under those lights, would you say that the embryo also attains this property of being based off of a dianoetic form that is geared towards the Homo sapiens species?
Okay, so I just want to be clear, that's not what a human is. So when we investigate what a human is, at least within like the dual aspect monist sense, a human is essentially just going to be a body and a soul, formed together into one entity, right? That's just what dual aspect monism says. But I also want to be clear and say that, yeah, I do take it that it is true of the embryo, but like even if it's not, as in the negation, as the embryo isn't based off, the form of a human, it would still be the case that unaliving it is wrong for very, very similar reasons, in the sense that it's not even like morally relevant, right? Um, because if it's the case that the fetus, or not even the fetus, the embryo is based off something that isn't a human, in the sense it's going to be like another form, like a sub form that isn't like that doesn't obtain a soul, right? It'll still be the case that the embryo is the type of thing that has to be a human, right? Um, because it can be disciplinated. And I just want to be clear, not to get into metaphysics, but when we investigate first order ontological profiles in the sense of dianotic forms, it can just be based off our semantical thesis. And when we investigate like an embryo and the dianotic form of an embryo, it can just be the case that within the embryo, or the dianotic form of the embryo, that it just has to achieve being a human. Or that if it doesn't achieve in the sense that it's unalived, right? Or I mean, excuse me, killed, then it would just be wrong.
Wait, what were your semantics for a human again? Because I mean, I'm using pretty
Mhm.
standard biological terminology for a human as being a member of the Homo sapiens species, but you cashed out something different that seemed more so fit for a theory of personal identity. Like maybe you want to say that's what a person is, but to say that's what a human is, I think that's just going to be very biologically idiosyncratic now.
Okay, so it just when like actually like your mic is clear now, so thank you. I can understand you clearly. But yeah, it isn't going to be under like a biological thesis. So at this point, it's going to be a semantical contention. My account of a human, that being dual aspect monism, is going to be an account for a metaphysical human, which is something that's standard within metaphysics, such as Aristotle and in how he posits a certain metaphysical account of what a human is. If you just disagree that calling it a human, I mean, I don't really care. I just call it a human because it's more appropriate for the metaphysics, right? But if you much rather call it like a person, I guess that's fine. It's just going to be a disagreement on the metaphysical, not the metaphysical, the semantical thesis. Excuse me.
Okay, okay. With that clarified, and with that in mind, I'm not sure if you committed yourself to the view that the embryo actually does have this property of being based off of the dianoetic form, being geared towards your semantics of humanness.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I said there is just that whether what's based off of a human or not a human, in the sense that like what's based off of is not like having a soul, doesn't really matter to the theory, because it can be the case of what the fetus, or not the fetus, the embryo, excuse me, what the embryo is based off of. It can be the case that within that dianotic form of the embryo, that it must obtain the property a human, right? The soul, right? or that, and if it doesn't, obtain anything that's included within the dianotic form, and this is true of all sensible forms, that's going to be a frustration of that form. And when we get into the meta-ethics of it, the semantical thesis is just going to be that if it's going to be a frustration of a form, then it's going to be the case that it's wrong. Okay, so if you unalive it while what's included within the dianoid form is such that it obtains the property of a soul, it's still going to be wrong for very similar reasons, and honestly, morally, or actually, reasons are not even morally relevant, because it wouldn't even change my stance on it or my epistemic position.
Okay. You're taking a lot of time to answer pretty small questions. That's not like a dig or anything, but I am just like highlighting the idea that I'm gonna ask some like more questions that I don't wanna just like I get like a lot of reiterations of the same position over and over in the future. So from my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the embryo does in fact have a dianoetic form, not necessarily towards humanist, but something that's like human-like, or where it's going to have a conjunction of like a soul and a body. Would you be happy signing off on the view that the zygote attains this property as well?
Just like has a property of being based off a dianoetic form. This is just the case of all sensible forms, and that's just going to be analytically true. And actually, I didn't want you to
No,
say,
it's
excuse me, I'm
not just to be clear,
uh,
not just a dianoetic form simpliciter, but a dianoetic form such that it's going to be geared towards the unity of a soul and a body. Specifically human-like one that you'd mentioned earlier when you signed off on the embryo having that property.
oh yeah. So for the case of the embryo, yeah, it would have the property of like like a dianoetic form that must achieve being a human. Yeah,
And my next question was, is that true for the zygote as well?
yeah, it can be.
I mean, I understand that there's no logical contradiction in that. Maybe you're using a specified modality that would elucidate more, but can you just answer the question without that modal operator there so that I actually know the truth value?
Yeah, so the reason why I say it can be is because whether it's the case that it does or it doesn't really change like the ethics or like really like the metaphysical part, because it's still going to be the case that if the zygote isn't based off something that has a soul, that is going to be based off something that must achieve a soul. So it doesn't even matter if it's like if it's based off, a dianoetic form that which has a soul or which doesn't have a soul.
Well, the diadoetic form that has a soul being a predicate, you were able to sign off on the embryo having that. I just want to know, are you going to extend that to the fetus? Or sorry, to the zygote, like you did with the fetus?
Oh yeah, the embryo. Yeah. Yeah, I'm totally fine with like saying that it does have one, but like if you just contend with me or you ask me to prove that, yeah, I mean whether I can literally just like temporarily concede that what's based off of doesn't even have a soul, and what I'd say is it still leads to the same conclusion.
No, I mean, I was never asking if it has a soul specifically. I was just asking if like the conjunction of like the soul and body in a human-like manner was going to be a predicate of its dianoetic forms.
I mean, yeah, if you want to answer your question explicitly, yeah, I can extend this towards the zygote as well.
Okay. Can you extend it to the ovum?
To the ovum, like, are you
Yeah.
talking? I'm sorry, I haven't read too much on biology. I'm just talking about like the eggs.
Yeah, like the egg prior to the zygotic stage.
So within the case of an egg, I mean, just based off our metaphysical commitments, yeah, I'll just say that, not to get into metaphysics, of course, which, metaphysics just talks about whether there's semantical disputes or not. But yeah, I would just say that based on our metaphysical commitments, that it would just be the case that such it's not.
Based off of this plan. Okay, so the embryo has a dianoetic form with that predicate of a conjunction of soul and body in a very human-like manner, specifically in the kinds of semantics that you had for humanness prior that's non-biological. Um, and you were able to extend that property from the fetus to the zygote. You're able to extend that property from the fetus to the embryo, from the embryo to the zygote, but you're not going to extend it from the zygote to the ovum. And I want to know a salient delineation between those elements.
Yeah, I can definitely explain this. So, yeah, I just really want to get into like the first order ontology, and discuss what types of entities even exist at this point. So, within the case of an ovum, I would even say that's going to be like a separate entity from like the woman, itself, right? So I would just say it's going to be the same entity, as a woman, and the woman, of course, is going to be a human under my view, which just means that she also has a body and a soul. And I don't take it that one entity or one body can have two souls.
Oh well, surely you're not even going to say that the embryo has a soul or the zygote has a soul, right? So, I mean, just telling me that the ovum doesn't have a soul independent from the mother by negating the idea that the mother could have two souls, well, that's not informing me of anything. Unless you want to sign off on the view that the zygote has a soul.
What I extended was literally just saying that the zygote and the embryo both had souls, just to be clear. Maybe that wasn't explicitly clear, but that's exactly the type of thing that, I extended.
Okay, okay. I thought we were just talking about the souls and bodies as being some sort of predicate of a dianoetic form. I didn't know you were actually taking the view that the soul was being attributed to literally the zygote and the embryo, respectively. Um, so we have the ovum, which you're saying the ovum does in fact have a soul, actually, right? If you
No,
think
what
about
I'm
it.
saying is just that the ovum itself, right? When we investigate the first order ontology, I would just say that the types of entities that exist, that the ovum is going to be the same entity as the woman, right? Or part of the same entity, right? And if that's the case, I don't think that one entity or one human can have two souls.
Yeah, which is just the affirmation of what I said, no?
Yeah, if it's the case that they cannot have two souls, right? And this is of course going to like the metaphysical modality, right? And is just going to be based off what exactly we take reality to be, right? It's going to be the case that it's impossible for the ovum to have a soul. So even if the case of what the ovum is based off of for its own ontology, let's just say that it's going to be a subform of the ovum itself, right? It would just be the same, right? It's impossible such that what's based off of is even geared towards, like having a soul, right? Or having a disposition to obtain a soul.
It's kind of a semantic dispute, but I was using transitivity to uh, imply that under your worldview, you think that the ovum actually does have a soul because the ovum is the mother. The mother just does have a soul, so therefore the ovum just does have a soul because it is the mother. Right.
The ovum itself
So
doesn't have a soul.
yeah, independent of the mother.
Yeah, yeah.
So it actually does have. So it actually does have a soul. Just its soul is contingent on the mother, right?
I would just say that if you're just talking about like not to get into mereology, or I mean mereology, excuse me, but if you're just talking about how what's part of has a soul, then like sure, that just seems to be like something that's trivial.
Yeah, yeah. So when the mother is on her period, or if a girl's on her period, really, or a woman specifically, um, she's on her period, she releases a bunch of eggs. You think it's possible to like flush a soul down the toilet? No, clearly not. So if I'm not implying that the soul necessarily has spatiotemporal location, but I just find it weird to say that you flush something down the toilet that actually has a soul. Like
Oh,
that
I
seems
don't
pretty
know.
weird to me.
Okay, so I don't know like if you heard. Are you done talking?
No, or
Uh,
yeah, I'm done.
Okay, so yeah, I don't know if you heard me, but I just said that the ovum specifically by itself cannot have a soul. But also, when we talk about a soul, I just want to be like very clear on the metaphysical thesis that when we investigate Plotinian metaphysics, that when he talks about a soul, those things are just fragmented focuses of nous, and those things are located within nous, and essentially, we can just say that they just control the body from within nous. So it would just be impossible for it like to be fleshed down. But also like yeah, of course souls aren't going to be within the ovum at all. Not at all. I mean, like the ovum is part of an entity that which has a soul, but like the ovum or the eggs themselves, yeah, they by themselves cannot have souls.
Okay. So do you think that souls actually do have spatiotemporal location or not?
Well, I don't know, like if you like really track the metaphysics there, but what I was saying is just that if it's the case that souls are fragmented focuses of nous, and nous and they're located within nous, of course something nous is going to be the highest entity within the hierarchy of reality, something that immediately proceeds from the one, which just means that it's impossible for it to be temporal.
Uh, so okay, so it's impossible for it to be temporal. So I guess you think that souls exist like infinitely, like they were just beyond space time. Okay. Well, I think those are pretty weird semantics for a soul. I'm not even attempting to dispute the existence of these souls. It's just that the way you describe them just seems so it seems so weird. I don't even feel like an obligation to contend their existence. It's kind of like you're giving yourself a queerness objection there. But um okay, so we have the ovum conceptually. Um and it actually does have a soul, but only in virtue of the noose. Fortunately, for me, it doesn't matter how far away spatially you remove the ovum from the mother. The noose is not going to occupy space time, so you're still going to say that it does have a soul in virtue of the mother's existence out there. So you think that it loses the soul when it meets the sperm, right? Like it loses the
Uh,
mother's soul.
okay, so once, the eggs are released, them themselves, they don't have independent souls, right? They're just part of an entity that has a soul. Maybe they didn't track this, but that's exactly the type of thing that I'm describing. And when I just want to be very clear on like the story metaphysical thesis that I'm holding to, because maybe you didn't track, the soul theory. But what's being said there is just that, excuse me. Yeah. Souls control the body, from within Nous. So they wouldn't control for example, if you like chop your arm off, right? Um, I wouldn't say like your soul is now controlling your arm independent of your body or the rest of your body, right? Even it's the case that the soul had originally controlled your arm, right? It just stopped controlling the arm because the arm has, been chopped off from the rest of the body. Okay. Um, so, I mean, to answer your question, you said something like, "Oh, is it the case that the ovum lose a soul on contact of sperm?" If it's the case, I mean, I just wouldn't even like say that they ever had souls to begin with, right? Like ovum don't have souls. That's not the type of thing to have souls. Um, yeah.
Yeah, but it's okay. So it's part of the mother. The mother does have a soul, um, and the things that are the mother, like it is a part of the mother as an entity. So we're thinking about on kind of like a mereological lens here. It's part of the mother as an entity, and that mother does in fact have a soul. Now I'm not trying to commit a composition fallacy or anything, but due to its spatio-temporal location, which is non-existence and in virtue of the noose, I just found it really hard for you to be able to separate at what point the embryo does have the mother soul and when it loses that. Because at some point in time, that embryo being, or sorry, that ovum being a part of the mother is part of an entity that has a soul. That entity has a soul. It is that entity. It does have a soul. Um, Now this could be semantic, or it's probably like a lot of semantics. So it doesn't really speak a lot to the substance that you're providing, but it makes it hard for me to understand exactly when it loses its identity from the mother more specifically. I guess I'll just laser focus on that. You really think that it's part of the mother, and then once a sperm touches it, which is a fraction of its size, by the way, like it looks like an astronaut touching a planet. It looks like a man like reaching the moon for the first time, or even larger. I don't know. But you think as soon as contact was made there, that's when it's no longer part of that entity. Well, that's just going to get into weird mereological semantics that I wouldn't say in the same sense that my criticisms didn't carry much weight to your substance. I don't think this sort of distinction even provides much substance in the first place because it's just going to be in the semantics of what you consider an entity and what you consider is a separation from entity. So I want you to sign off right here. You do think that when the sperm touches the embryo, or sorry, when it touches the ovum, just to be clear, that ovum is no longer part of the mother as soon as it contacts. But before that, it actually was part of the mother. What?
Okay, so I don't believe that you're really tracking like anything that I've been saying. And honestly, after this response, I'm just gonna ask you if you conclude. I'm not gonna be like a rude interlocutor and say, or actually force conclusions, right? But I just want to be clear: the embryo never has a mother's soul. So when you like attempt to, categorize the embryo as having the mother's soul and ask me the question, when did he never have the mother's soul? That's just like malformed and confused, right? And even then, I clarified the first order ontology and said, the eggs aren't separate entities, right? And it doesn't seem like he actually had any contention with the first order ontology, right? But the embryo is a separate entity from the mother, right? I just wouldn't say, the embryo and the mother are the same entity, but the eggs are the same entity. And sure, we can say that they are going to be a separate entity once there is a sperm. I mean, that's fine. I don't think there's any contentions with that or like any like problems with that. But yeah, I am like willing to conclude. Excuse me. Um, yeah. It doesn't seem like you're really understanding the metaphysics.
So I grant that you're willing to conclude. I'm not. This is a really interesting position, and I'm having a lot of fun investigating it. I'd rather continue, but if you want to bow out, sure you can, and then I'll continue criticizing your view for the recording because I'm just gonna keep doing it. So if you want to give your closings, go ahead.
Yeah, I said I wasn't going to be a rude interlocutor. If you still want to continue, I am willing to continue. But at this point, it just seems I'm going to repeat myself because it doesn't seem like you're really actually tracking the metaphysics. But yeah, this is actually why I don't want you to. I just want to conclude because you're not really tracking and not really providing like any meaningful contentions to what I've been saying. Also, you just didn't respond to the point that I just made during your talking time.
Yeah, and I don't think you really gave a succinct answer to the question. Um, I guess loosely, if I were to interpret it, you are saying that okay, you're not saying that the ovums are different entities. You're saying they're just part of the mother, but the zygote is a separate entity. So I'm just like implying, okay, yeah, it's a different entity at that point. Now, do you think that someone who disagrees, I'll ask you this, someone who disagrees that they're different entities, do you think that there's a meaningful proposition that they disagree on? Or do you think that they're simply using different words to describe those entities? Now, if it's the latter, I find it hard to attribute any moral weight to the latter distinction, but I do understand some reasons as to why there would be moral shift in the former.
Okay, so you just asked me about someone who, disagrees that they are different entities. Well, at that point, I honestly could just dismiss that in virtue of it being like an external critique and not really accepting, the internal critique. But yeah, it's fine though. And honestly, I just want to give my conclusions here since you're not really tracking anything that I've been saying. Um, yeah, like throughout my debate, my interlocutor, didn't really track the metaphysics. I had to clarify. And actually, I gave like the most, rigorous, explanation of my metaphysical thesis throughout the entire debate. And still, they didn't track it. And they asked me, questions that I had already answered, and I had to be very explicit, like, like a toddler to my interlocutor. Afterwards, we're just gonna continue critiquing my argument. That's totally fine. I can actually post my argument within the side chat or the gen chat for him to critique, on recording. And maybe I'll respond to it, maybe I won't. After like I'm like because I'm just gonna conclude it and I'm just gonna leave. But yeah, I do like genuinely take it that I've won this conversation. But yeah, yeah. Good on you, Lucario Anders.
Thanks, man. You can like step out and make room for my victory speech, I guess. Those were like really weird semantics, and it seemed like you actually didn't even have conviction when signing off on the views that the embryo had these properties that you were ascribing the dianoetic properties. It seemed like you didn't even really know what a zygote was prior to me mentioning it. And then later, when it comes to the actual separation of the ovum from the zygote, I find it really, really unclear on whether you actually think that there's a propositional contrast between the worldviews. One interlocutor says that, hey, that's the same entity. The other one says, no, they're different entities. Um, I don't see a propositional contrast other than just using the term entity to encapsulate those kinds of separations. I don't think there's anything meaningful behind your argumentation other than just semantics of those entities. And what I'm really, really curious and what I'm really, really curious on is the moral value of that separation right there. Right, I find it very weird to give moral value to an ovum, but only after it's made physical contact with a sperm, which is also just part of the father. So a part of the father touched the part of the mother, and then there's like a new entity. And like loose senses, yeah, sure. I think that there is a new entity. It's a new classification, but I'm not going to really give moral value to it. I'm going to give moral value to things that have property ascriptions to them. And without those property ascriptions to them being able to carry that moral weight beyond just like the semantic lens, I find your position entirely unmotivated. And I'm actually really, really curious on. We can just like drop all of the semantics. We can drop like the Mariology talk. And I really just want to ask you, well, okay, the sperm touched the ovum, why is that morally valuable? Okay, maybe it has like a new dianoetic form, and I'd be curious on motivations for that. One, the existence of that, the truth of that assertion right there, and then two, its moral weight. Why would I even care about it, even if it did exist, even without these weird semantics of like some soul existing in a noose that's not spatio-temporally located, that's not really semantically contrastable. It's not really propositionally contrastable. You can only like separate it. Well, yeah, I guess in virtue of the semantics that you contrast, but only in like a really weird sense where you have to use a language that diverges away from common biological nomenclature. Like this argument is just a mess, dude. I'm sorry. If I were to be blunt about it, I think it's absolute dog shit, and I think it's just a horrible excuse for gestational enslavement when we're talking about the freedom the bodily autonomy of women, an oppressed, marginalized community of people in our societies. And I just find these kind of motivations to oppress them just piss poor. Like, there's nothing really more to say about it unless you have some motivations for the moral way, which you don't because you already gave your closing statement because you bowed out because I think internally you started to realize how silly it sounded. So yeah, I mean that was I guess it was a good discussion. It was a good discussion in the sense that we didn't really interrupt each other. We didn't really insult that much. It's just that your argumentation did all the heavy lifting for me. I didn't even have to do any of that. But yeah, GG's, man. Hey, maybe one day you can come up with a better argument.
Nice rhetorical move there, Lance Anders.
Thanks, man.
Okay, so I'm gonna go to another,